Welcome to The Real Deal, where we get real about what it takes to succeed. Whether it's wealth, health, relationships, or finding your purpose, we talk to the masters to uncover the secrets to defying the odds and creating your own rock star legacy. I'm Doug, and after working on multiple Grammy-winning records as an author, transformational speaker, and your personal translightenment coach, I'm committed to your growth and success. And now, here's the real deal. All right, here we go. Welcome to The Real Deal On with Doug. Today's episode is brought to you by guidedhypnotic.com. That's guidedhypnotic.com to get your free download of a guided hypnotic meditation. Tom Martin, president of Tom Martin Media, LLC. For more than 30 years, Tom Martin has worked closely with many of the world's most respected thought leaders, authors, and innovators, starring with a 20-year career in television news producer for ABC News, CBS News, CNN, and NBC News, covering stories ranging from politics to entertainment. Tom covered the White House for public television's Nightly Business Report and the aftermath of the 9/11 tragedy for ABC's Good Morning America. For CBS Sunday Morning, profiled dozens of musicians, artists, and political leaders. At CNN, Tom created a biographical series featuring individuals at the top of his work, ranged from medical stories for ABC News to profiles of famous individuals, including Paul McCartney, Tony Robbins, and George Soros. Moving into the PR realm, Tom led campaigns for Fortune 100 companies and provided media training to numerous thought leaders and business CEOs. His clients have been featured on NBC's Today Show, Oprah, and Bloomberg Television, and in publications including the Wall Street Journal and Inc. magazine. With CBS News anchor Jane Pauley, Tom serves on the advisory board of the national nonprofit Children's Health Fund, which provides medical care to children living in poverty. Tom lives in Ridgefield, Connecticut. Wow, that was awesome. Fun. Awesome, Tom.
I was going to ask if you could travel with me, but these days I could just carry you on my phone and so like,
there you go, play the recording.
Or now I can play the recording. That's right. So thank you.
Love it, brother. So first of all, thank you so much for taking time out of your busy schedule to hang with us and share your wisdom. We've known each other for, it's got to be over 20 years.
I know, it's been a long time. We've come a long way together.
Yeah. And you are by far, one of the nicest, warmest, heartfelt guys. I know you do everything with heart, with passion. I thank you so much, because every once in a while I'll call you up and be like, hey, dude, can you just, give me a couple pointers here? I don't know what I'm doing. And you've always been so graceful with that.
Love what you're doing. I love how you're, it's funny. I don't mean to start talking about myself.
No, you should. That's why you're here.
But when I speak to groups, whether usually it's live groups, but sometimes in interviews, I'll say, a few years ago, a graphic artist asked me for a tagline, like my business card needed a tagline. So it just popped into my brain: connect, communicate, change the world. And what I love about, so those are the kind of PR projects that I love to get involved with. Stories that I like to tell, people I'd like to support. So what I love about you, sir, is, that you focus your career on really making a difference in people's lives. And so I sort of can live vicariously. That's part of why I love the work that I do, is that, like, if people are helping, the children with their medical needs or whatever the case may be, overcoming addiction and stuff like that.
Well, the truth is, you're not living vicariously. You are 100% supporting and on the team. Like, it's not.
Thank you. It feels good. I do feel like I'm on the team. I like that feeling. That's right.
Yeah, 100%. So, share a little bit about you. When we were chatting a little bit earlier, you started to talk about how you got into PR in the first place. And one of the themes of this show, The Real Deal On, is to help people think in possibility thinking, that they don't have to be locked into a paradigm, that it's okay to change. And sometimes we have a belief about who we are, what's possible, and that keeps us stuck. And you started to share a little bit on how you were maybe not necessarily choosing the freedom that you were given. Mm-hmm. So let's start with that.
Exactly. Cool. Yeah. So as they say, as you musicians say, I'll riff on that for a few minutes here. Yes, no, it's interesting. In college, and I'm thinking about college because my daughter Lindsay's at home. She just graduated from Georgetown University 2 weeks ago online, one of the online commencement programs that are going around at the moment. And my son Eric is now a college freshman, also down in DC. They both came home from DC a couple months early because of what's going on in the world. But when I was in college, way back, in the Mesozoic era, I used to study. I was majored in philosophy. Talk about a useful. It's like trade. Like I could put my shingle out, philosopher.
Right.
But I began to focus in medical philosophy, and basically what that is paradigm shifts. Because anyone who has ever watched Saturday Night Live years ago remembers the bloodletting and healing. Now we're healing with herbs. It's like, wow, that really works. Amazing. But
the leeches, are they in or out now?
I've got some in my backyard.
Yeah, we're bringing them back.
I know. So paradigm shifts, exactly, in medicine, in astronomy. They used to, between Copernicus and Galileo, they would burn people at the stake if they tried to change the paradigm, shift the paradigm. You get so entrenched. And, certainly there are a lot of challenges going on in the world right now. It's like, I'm not going to pretend there are not. I'm not oblivious to it. But at the same time, there's a lot of freedom of opportunity. Part of it is because of technology, the way we're conversing right here. And also, again, like you said, we were talking a few minutes ago about people, I live in Connecticut, about 60 miles north of Manhattan. I love Manhattan, used to live there for many years. I haven't been in 3 or 4 months. My life is going okay. I will go back. I look forward to going back. But there's probably a lot of people who, if people still work in cubicles and mega corporation X or something, it's like, you know what? I'm not going back to that. I've got to spend more time with my family. I really like this. I don't want to be in my car, 3 or 4 hours a day. I don't want to be on a crowded commuter train for various reasons. So it's a great time to shift. And I think there are plenty of opportunities around. I definitely believe that every one of us has great talent and potential inside. There's a movement going on right now, of course, to reawaken people. Like, every one of us matters. Every one of us has talent and potential. And it's very encouraging for me to see, that people with great diversity are believing that and elevating that. Like, we don't want to see anybody putting anybody else down or saying, you don't matter. It's like those days are over. So
yeah, let's talk about that a little bit in not in a political sense, but in an internal sense, that all of this boils down to like that internal belief, right? And are you taking on, and this is what I love about what you do, is helping people tell the stories so that someone can go, oh, wait, if it's possible for them, it's possible for me. And our job as influencers, as storytellers, as servant leaders, is to help people break out of their own limiting paradigm, notwithstanding what's going on out there, right? We understand there's always going to be, that's not going to change. It's
right.
Like nature is brutal, right? Nature itself is brutal.
Yeah, you've watched Wild Kingdom. Yes, I know.
So if we just go, okay, well, the difference between, using Wild Kingdom as an example, you don't see the elk complaining about the lion, as far as I know. I don't speak elk.
No, exactly.
But they just do what they got to do to, avoid. And I don't want to take social issues and boil it down to something as trivial as that, which I have no way to know if it be true or not.
Yeah. Well, I like what I'm sorry to interrupt you, but I like what Jim Rohn said about nature. He said, how tall does a tree grow in nature? As tall as it possibly can. It doesn't stop. It's like, I'm done. I don't know. I don't think I can do it. It's like, and so, maybe say, oh, what does that have to do with human beings? But I think it has a lot to do with human beings. Really.
It does, because the gift and the challenge of our intellect and our language is it creates self-imposed limits.
Yes.
The tree can't do it. And that's where the analogy is. That's where Jim was saying. It's like, well, a tree doesn't have someone and even if we did, and here's the thing, even if we sat and yelled at the tree, you suck, you're never going to grow taller than 5 feet. You're the worst tree ever.
Right.
It wouldn't prevent it.
Right.
What's so interesting.
I'm sorry, go ahead. You finish your thought. I'm sorry. No, I was just going to say that reminds me, the yelling thing always reminds me of my friend Marcia Martin, no relation, but we connected about 15 years ago when a friend of mine said, we should call Jack Canfield's office because people are starting to do things called webinars. And she was a tech person who did webinars. We should talk to Jack Canfield. He has great content. So Marcia works closely with Jack, still does. Together, they help put together that roster of experts who were on The Secret, if you remember the movie The Secret about the law of attraction. And so Marcia teaches communication to like hotel staffs and stuff like this. And one of the things she says is like, if you're in one of those yelling confrontations, she says, you can just think to yourself, what a fascinating shade of red. I didn't know that color was found in nature. You don't just, oh, they're attacking me. I don't matter. Oh my God. It's like, it's hard, easier said than done. I know what you mean, but
simple, not easy, right? Because we all, I mean, that's the work we do. We've been in the personal development world, and we have seen, experienced, been directly involved in situations where we believed we were right and we forgot what we were arguing about. And that's the time when you go, oh, I'm going to be fascinated instead of frustrated right now. Let me, and
exactly. And there's a great, again, through technology, especially, there's a great opportunity to connect with so many audiences, and people who are looking for help or advice or just to be, opened up to their true potential. We all resonate differently with different people. So it's like there's many choices that we could make. I'd like to work with that coach, or I'd like,
right.
a lot of opportunities. So absolutely.
And now more than ever, we need people to step up and offer their support, their love, their guidance, because things are considerably moving at a faster pace than ever before. And that has nothing to do with what's going on. Notwithstanding, just technology is moving faster than ever, and it has an impact.
Yes. Absolutely.
We never had. I mean, for you, this must have been interesting. So you started your career, all right? So 30 years ago, the internet was around yet, or barely?
Well, I'll really date myself. No, I remember typewriters. I mean, in college, I would. They had electricity then. I will say.
Okay,
that.
All right.
Thank you, Thomas Edison. No, so electric type. No, so to make money part time in my college years in the early '80s, typing, word processing, and so on. So I remember when email started up, and I mean, I took a computer, coding, I forget what it was, DOS or whatever, very primitive computer coding class in college and stuff like that. But it's moving faster and faster and faster. And in fact, one of the projects I'm working on right now is helping a team of basically tech engineers who've created, I call it the new internet, reinvention of the internet that's not bogged down, not vulnerable to hacking and malware and stuff like that, and provides a data tunnel, so to speak, large enough for the big data that it's like maybe big data also helps advertisers track us down, which is annoying sometimes. They read, and who knows?
This would protect. It would protect the data.
Yeah, so encryption is part of it, but it's just they said the internet hasn't really been updated in 20 years, and so it's been from the work that I do, I loved like just parachuting into somebody's profession, like wow. Redesigning the internet, how cool! Or like music, how cool!
Right. So I have a contact for you, a referral. You may know him, and he'll probably be on this show. Do you know Scott Kloslowski?
No, I don't think so.
Okay, I'll hook you up with him. He has a company called Future Point of View, and he does internet security. He does like big stuff with the big companies. He wrote a book called God Create the Internet. He speaks of business mastery like every year. That's how I know him.
I'd love to meet him. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I'll hook you guys up. But in that, and we'll come back to that project. I'm just curious on how did you navigate, and did you see other people in the PR world and others kind of struggle with the technological transformations that were occurring? Like, obviously fax machine was new, and now it's like, who has one?
Right. No, well, that's true. No, I have seen that over the years. Exactly. I'll take it back one step even prior to that, if you don't mind.
No, of course.
When you talk about paradigms and being locked into a certain mindset, and then how do you break out of that? Again, in my college years, I was studying to be a lawyer because all my friends were becoming lawyers. I was kind of a nerd in high school, so got into the debate society and all that. So that was the natural thing to do. And then about my senior year of college, I realized, no, I've worked part-time doing that typing I mentioned, aforementioned typing.
Yeah.
Email me if you don't know what the hell I'm talking. Typing. Typewriters, exactly. A friend gave me an opportunity to work at the CBS News Washington Bureau down in D.C., going to Capitol Hill and the White House and so on. It was just fascinating, and not so much about being impressed with politicians or any of that, but just it was telling people stories that matter about opportunity and fighting discrimination and stuff like that. And then I moved into a little bit of business news, like you mentioned in that intro, about entrepreneurs. And so it really was great to know that you can break out of those limitations. And I didn't study communications. Like I said, I was a philosophy major. That's what stimulated me. But being interested in people's stories and not listening to people say, oh, no, you really shouldn't try to go into the television news because you don't have a communications major or blah, blah. It's like, I'm not listening to that. I'm going to show up. And, when I worked for CBS News and ABC News and CNN, the interns that I always really appreciated was people who just like jumped in, like, I can do that. And then there's always some interns like, well, I don't know. I've never learned that. Like, no, we don't have time for that, especially with the pace of the world.
Yeah.
If you think you can do it, jump right in. And those are the people who are very successful today in the television news because they didn't believe they were limited, So,
and that is so true. That's how I got into the music industry. I had a choice. I could go to school or I could intern. And I was like, after I did my research, I was like, I don't know, all the most successful people in music, all the most successful producers and artists and all of that, they didn't go to school. And by the way, when I'm done with school, I'm going to have to intern anyway. So why don't I just start interning?
Perfect.
And
exactly.
Same thing. Like exactly.
Yeah.
Ended up working on multiple Grammy-winning records, and I started out as an intern. I started out working for free.
That's great. Yeah, exactly. It's funny. As my friends know, I spend far too much time on Facebook than I really should. It's for my own good. Although we love Facebook, Mark. If you're listening, we love Facebook. But there's some meme I've seen from time to time that said those saying it's impossible should just get out of the way of the people actually doing it. And that's like you did and I did.
Yep. Well, and I think that's so telling and so important right now that personal responsibility, people start getting more into that self-leadership where, we don't allow the narrative of other people prevent us, because the most successful people on the planet all were told they couldn't do it for whatever reason. Exactly. And for some by well-meaning people. It's not that, I remember when I first got into real estate, one of our side hustles is real estate investing. People that I loved and cared about were like, I don't know about, it's,
I know. Right.
That's risky, and like at all these reasons. And that's, that's very different than someone going, you can't because, you're an idiot or whatever. But that wedge of discouragement is often just enough. We don't need, as a matter of fact, sometimes that, and I will actually say, not sometimes, always, it is worse to have a small wedge of discouragement, to have someone having little belief in you rather than telling you absolutely no way you can't do it. Because at least when someone does that, you can't do it for whatever reason, now you have that energy to push back. Like, no, I'm going to show you.
Right.
And that can be beneficial.
Totally. No, I do. I definitely agree with you there. It's funny. In the past couple of years, I've enjoyed listening to different live streams from Dean Graciosi, who's teamed up with Tony Robbins on some things. And he just put a book out recently about the underdog effect. He said George Washington was an underdog that said, oh no, you're doomed. It'll never work. So like, thank God George Washington didn't listen to those people. So like you said, it can be a motivator.
Yeah. And all that boils down to, which I believe, and why I do what I do, is for lack of a better term, is education and training. And that's why I appreciate, obviously, not you besides you as a person, but what you do is you help people get the word out and educate on other perspectives. And this is what's so important, especially now, is to be able to have access to other points of view and have people share their story, because everyone has a unique, special, powerful story, and you never know whose story is going to be the one that has that person break free from whatever confines they have, whatever limits they've allowed to be put on them. That, again, all limits, no matter what is going on outside, does not matter. It's your relationship with what's going on outside that we have to deal with. And it's our duty to help people in using our best skills.
Absolutely.
You're clearly talented. What are you working on now? You have the internet thing. Like, how can we learn more about that? Like, that sounds pretty cool. Is there?
Sure. Well, people are welcome to contact me. You can contact me right here on Facebook or through Doug.
Well, this is also going to be a podcast and all that. So, and we're not wrapping up just yet, but, feel free. We'll give your information.
Yeah. So, well, my website is tommartinmedia.com. So you can find how to contact me there. It's just email tom@tommartinmedia.com. But I love conversations, and, I love the brainstorming side of what I do. It's funny, as you know, I've learned a lot from Tony Robbins and Tony Robbins coaches and so on. And a couple years into, I've been doing this for about 12, 14 years now in terms of sort of independent PR, coming out of the news business, and then working for a couple of larger PR firms in New York City. And earlier, a few minutes ago, you mentioned about people who hadn't moved forward, like they're still stuck in the fax machine era and so on. And I remember the round of layoffs that affected me, that set me on this path that I'm on today, which I'm really grateful. But I was like, thank you for laying me off. Thank you. Right. It was some older, PR executive saying, I kind of miss those old days where you'd write kind of a newspaper style article, and then you'd call certain places and they just drop it right in. It's like, no, I'm sorry. Their social media is here to stay. I mean, they were, if they never got on to social media, they're history for sure, but it's always changing, always changing. And so I've decided, you could either curse the change, like, oh, it's so hard, I have to learn something new. It's like, wow, I get to learn something new, and it's wonderful to connect with people on a new platform and stuff like that.
Yeah, and that classic linguistic transformation, instead of I have to, I get to.
That's right. No.
Now, as you bring something up, not to necessarily get too much into the, how a hot dog is made, how much, because I've experienced this in, doing marketing when I was at the treatment center. And of course, now Heidi and I, we, need to market ourselves and so forth. The, what's it called? Like in, like where it's like you're almost buying the spot to put in an article, but it's really an ad. Like, how much of that is really a thing? And I'm not trying to like disillusion people, but we're getting the real deal.
Well, there's more. Yeah, no, I appreciate that question. No, there's more and more of that all the time. It's funny. I have a friend, my age, who's an author, and actually she's the one who brought me into the new internet. So if you think older folks can't be on the cutting edge, wait till you hear about the new internet that I'm working on. But she told me, hey, Tom, stop using that phrase old-fashioned. But I am kind of old-fashioned as far as appreciating a good story of adversity and having a dream and overcoming challenges. It's like
classic hero's journey.
Yes, exactly. It's Luke Skywalker, what Joseph Campbell talked about in his myth classes and stuff like that. And so there is a lot of pay for play, whatever some people call it. Larry King is still around doing interviews, all the interviews and God bless him. I hope he's around for many more decades, but all the interviews he does right now are paid interviews. Nothing wrong with that. In December, I went to Santa Barbara, California, beautiful spot, with another project I'm working on using blockchain and partially cryptocurrency in traditional funds to invest. It's a $100 million project to raise money to support medical research that the big pharmaceutical companies are not interested in. They don't think it's profitable enough, and there's a lot of rare diseases that there's some work being done. Like, how do we get these to the people? How do we save lives?
Because it probably involves something that God created that they can't patent and like profit on.
I know. Yes, it's a strange world. Exactly. So that company, sort of on their own, they didn't really consult me on this decision. Although I don't know, maybe I would have gone for it. Kathy Ireland, former supermodel, very successful in the business sense with different companies and so on. So she hosts a couple of pay-for-play TV shows. So they paid her thousands and thousands of dollars to interview them on her beautiful set in Santa Barbara, California. And so, okay, it gets the word out, and so a lot of these outlets buy time on different networks. It's like, okay, maybe it's a good value. But again, speaking of being old-fashioned, I really believe that every one of us has a story, and by being timely and newsworthy, we can get some airtime, whether it's on a traditional old-fashioned TV station or an internet show or a podcast interview. It's like you want to be helpful, you want to be of service, you want to fit with sort of what's really going on in the world right now. You don't want to be too pushy about, you don't want to try to sell them something. People hate that. But there's plenty of outlets, so I don't think you need to go with these, pay people to carry your story. I just don't.
Right, I would agree. I guess the question becomes, and I guess it does say it, and it's small print, like this is a paid advertisement, paid whatever. Somewhere it says that. And I think what's great, and again, I know it gets into an interesting conversation about, I know whatever your political affiliations are, when Trump pointed out the opportunity of, look at these platforms, Facebook, Twitter, blah, blah, blah. You're either a publisher or a platform, and they have two different areas of liability. And I bring that up in that if there are places where paying for play is a form of censorship, right? Because it becomes promotion, and it puts me, if I don't have the money to pay to get my story out there, I'm by proxy being censored because I don't have the money. It's not about the message, it's about the money.
And it's not, there's a lot of truth to that. And it's also not just about money, it's about power. Like if you look at
either way. But point is like, it's getting harder and harder. So interestingly, that at first, and I dealt with this in the music industry, right? So when the peak of my career was when Napster came out. So that changed how music was distributed. Not just Napster, but the technology around it. Whereas no longer I had to buy a record, and I actually was kind of consciously knowing if I was going to make a mixtape to share with my friend, or if I was going to copy it, we knew we're copying it, right? And it was a thing, right? And but it was also, it made it hard to do multiple copies, and then those degradation. So if you got a copy of a copy of a copy of a copy, it was whatever. Then peer-to-peer through computers changed the way people monetized and all of that. And it changed the industry forever. And there are arguments to both sides, for good or for bad. There's no right or wrong to that. People have their own perspectives and their relationship with the change. When Facebook and social media and all that came out, it leveled the playing field. Now everyone had a voice, and it was up to you to either take personal responsibility for what you believed, what you didn't, what you put out, what you didn't, what you shared, what you didn't, and people could choose. Then they started going, oh, well now, every business is now paying to have their information put in the news feed more appropriately. The algorithms are now kind of analyzing what you're engaging on and all of that. So that's what you're going to see more of, and blah, blah, blah. So like, where does the line start going that it's becoming back to what you shared? Money is power. And the influence, and then how does the little guy get out there again? How do we get our story out there if we don't have the power, the influence, or the money? And then we get corrupted because Kathy Ireland, as the example, all of a sudden she's like, oh, someone's going to pay me.
I'm not knocking it, by the way.
Huh?
But I said I'm not knocking that Kathy's.
No, I'm not knocking it either. This isn't a knocking thing. It's an earnest question.
These are the forces of the world. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. So how do we navigate it? And this is where, again, the pivoting comes, because for the little guys, we used to be able to go on Facebook and go, okay, cool, and we'll get some information out there. Now no one sees it if you didn't pay for it.
Right. How many hours is this show?
Right. Well, of course. And again, this is just we're not going to solve any problems. It's more to get people to think and go, okay, how could I do things differently?
Okay, well, several probably unrelated thoughts come to mind. One is, yes, there was a democratization process going on. I have a friend, I love magic tricks and so on. Did magic shows when I was, again, the nerd teenager in high school. In fact, if any of you were old enough to remember Dick Cavett, the talk show host, I produced for him. We had the same magic teacher, a little Italian man, Tony Slidini, in the theater district in Broadway. And so Dick moved to my town here in Connecticut. We got together last year. Hadn't seen him in 30 years. That was quite a trip.
Did you do some magic together?
Yes. It was fun. Very, very fun. So a lot of people don't even know the name, but he interviewed Janis Joplin and John Lennon, whatever. But at any rate, so in terms of, back in those days when I was into magic in the 80s, I had a friend who was an A&R man for Columbia Records, Michael Jackson, Bruce Springsteen, and so on. Mm-hmm. And I don't want to dig too far beneath the cover of how that business works, but there were probably a number of talented people, quote, semi-talented people who they had huge careers because you could work, you know better than I do, to process their voice and bring in the team. And and there's a lot of even more talented people, if we could rate them. It's all subjective, I know, but more talented people. And how do we get heard? So I remember there used to be something called MySpace. Mm-hmm. I think that was very, very big for musicians. Here's 6 songs I've written. The A&R guy at Columbia Music is not going to give me a chance, or the radio DJ, but you can get it out there and so on. So, so there is a democratization process. Yes, there's a lot of power being exerted in terms of, gatekeepers, what stories people hear right now. But I really believe that if you have an interesting story, and if I'll sound very idealistic. It's oh, Tom is so naive. It's if you're coming from the right place, if you have a good heart, if you want to be of service to people, and you're not attaching a dollar sign to that, yes, I do certain consulting, and we can talk about that some other time, but let me just help you, for God's sakes. I think that people appreciate that, even with, the algorithms at work on Facebook and so on. There's still a way to get through. I have a number of friends who are quite expert at social media. And one of my friends, Samantha Beauvais is her name. She has different experts on, a show similar to this. And so I happened to listen to one show that she did with a Facebook group expert. And apparently, because of the Facebook algorithm changes, suddenly Facebook, as well as probably some negative press about, hey, what's really going on here over there, I noticed oh my God, Facebook never used to advertise, but now every once in a while you see ads for Facebook groups where people who like bulldogs, or it's Facebook groups, it's really cool. It's okay, I didn't know you ever needed to advertise. But my friend Samantha says, in her expert, I forget his name at the moment, but said, you don't need 2 million followers. Can you really connect and interact with 2 million followers? I mean, maybe you can, I don't know. But have 100 who you're really connected with in your community. I lead a Facebook group, a mastermind group. If any of you want to learn more about that or join us for a sample call, I'd love that. We use Zoom video. We have about 20, 25 people there. And I'm always thinking, how can I help them? Our conversations, Doug, who can I introduce you to that might help move things forward? I love being a connector. It makes me feel useful,
Yeah.
And so in Facebook groups, you can really do that. And I think it works that way for musicians. And they think, well, that's very nice, 20 people. Do you realize how much it costs to have a recording session or whatever? It's well, it's complicated. I understand that. But I think that by genuinely connecting with people and really serving them and listening to them, about how Gary Vaynerchuk got his start. It's on Twitter, I'm going to reply to everybody. It's the thousands of people that contact you. Can you really reply to well, I guess you can't literally reply to everybody, but you can try.
And he started, obviously, on his YouTube channel, had there was a time he had 1 viewer, 2 viewers.
Right, exactly. Yes.
Well, exactly. And I agree with you totally. And I guess that's the question is, we're always looking for new ways to get our story out there, get our thing out there. And when we're looking at, we see, like you shared, and even and this is nothing new, by the way. Like, obviously, the music industry had the challenges back then, the news, this is always, it's part of being human. And I think,
right.
and if we could actually look at this whole thing in life a little bit more from that lens, like, look, we're just humans figuring it out and no one's perfect. Maybe it doesn't mean exactly what we think it means. Maybe it's us struggling with all of these changes and people respond poorly.
It's interesting. I'd always been this will sound like coming totally out of the blue, I know, but I've always been kind of interested in the Dalai Lama. I never really studied the Dalai Lama, never read any of his books, and I know there are the different reincarnations of the Dalai Lama. Back in October, a friend invited me to a little presentation in my little town here in Connecticut about what the Dalai Lama has to say about compassion. He was not there in person. They had film clips. They had some people who'd been imprisoned because of the human rights movement in Tibet and so on. But it's like, wow, compassion, it's like service is very important, obviously, being of service, but compassion also. And who knew that X months later, that'd be so important with what's going on in the world. So I think if you are a person of compassion and wanting to be of service, and you have some knowledge, whether it's music or storytelling or parenting advice, it's like I love what's this, Brendan Burchard, the Experts Academy. We're all an expert at something. At first I thought, well, is everybody really an expert? It's like, yes, they are, because they're passionate about something. Malcolm Gladwell said, an expert puts in the 10,000 hours. Bill Gates put in the 10,000 hours. Like, that's interesting. That makes sense. If you're passionate about something like music, you'll want to do it. You'll put in the hours, so you become more of an expert than somebody who's just starting to climb the ladder in terms of knowledge. You don't have to be at the top of the ladder.
But I got to share something that is so important that I've experienced when we talk about expertise and how everyone's an expert. My personal experience when I first got into Tony, and like, again, I'd applied, put myself in an environment, and I was there real time, and I had access to superstars and other interns, and we did everything in the industry. So I was able to, without realizing it, I was able to model at the right time, temporally, like where people were, and I could see the steps and so forth. And then I was like, all right, got it. This is great. And when Napster came out, I had to reinvent myself. And then, Tony, I was blessed enough. I got the gig with Tony, and I was like, I'm going to model Tony. Tony's the best, still is the number one guy on the planet when it comes to personal development, super talent, super everything. And when I got in there, I realized that Tony's 20,000 hours didn't help me get from here to here, because Tony's here was at a different time, different technology, different everything. So we need people sharing at their different stages. So someone doesn't have to be a Brendan Burchard, a Tony Robbins, a Gary Vee to share their expertise, because they need to help the person who's one or two steps behind them, because they can't model Tony. You can't model Gary Vee to the degree, and sometimes they forget, because they're like, man, when I first started out, I had infomercials.
Right. No, I know. No, you're making a very good point. I don't often think about that. The times in which we live and the technology and everything. No, it's very interesting. Right.
Right. And it's, even if the technology was the same, I love talking to Tony, and I haven't had a chance to talk to Gary, all that. Like, well, if you were me, what would you do now? And they tell you great stuff, and it's stuff that you already know, but you go, yeah, but you're saying that through a different filter, and I'm not making them wrong. I'm just going, like, you walking into a room right now with nothing is different than me walking into a room with nothing. You're still freaking Tony Robbins.
Right. Well, I don't know if you'll consider this a complete answer, but talk about a timeless quality that has never changed in eons. It's stubbornness. It's believing that you have value. I'm talented. It's like, oh, he's terrible. Oh God, it's like, no, I don't care what you say. I'm talented, and you see people like that, in music,
and they'll always succeed.
Yeah. Right. It's like, how did that person get? And maybe they've never progressed, or you don't care for their music or something like that. Usually they're not really bad. You just don't care for it. Or speaking for myself, because if they put in all those hours and that stubbornness, they will evolve in line with their vision. But I don't know. It's kind of,
we're going to have
sometimes I think of.
Dee Snider's going to be on the show, and
great.
Dee was one of the first time I ever did the show 20 years ago. I did it for radio. Dee was on it, and one of the things that I have all my clients watch is We Are Twisted Effing Sister. So if you haven't seen it yet, it's on Netflix.
No.
Check it out. It's exactly what you just talked about. The fact that Dee would not give up, the band would not give up, right? And they were told that they sucked. They were told that they were the A&R, the president of Atlantic Records told all of the A&R people, because they kept bringing them to him, if you bring this band Twisted Effing Sister to me again, you're fired.
Right.
And they got signed by Atlantic Records ultimately.
That's fun. Well, do you have time for 2 short stories?
Yeah, of course.
That point, because I think this is a very important point. If people get that from this conversation, I'll be so happy. If they're holding back in any way. One is my friend Marcia Martin, who I'd mentioned a few minutes ago. She came from San Francisco, where she worked with Werner Erhard and helped create EST and so on, which became Landmark Forum. And she said, I was kind of, I don't know, she didn't use the word naive or whatever, but I was young and idealistic at San Francisco in the early, the 68, 70. And she said, I decided that I wanted to work with the Democratic Party. So I went to Washington and I asked around, does anyone know anybody in government? And all I could come up with was a Republican senator. So I said, well, I'll go to his office. It's like she didn't realize he's not going to want to help you elevate in the Democrats. He's like, what are you thinking? But again, the same sort of thing about camping out at the office and the secretary saying, he's really busy. It's a crazy day. It's like, oh, that's fine. I'll wait right here for 20 hours. It's like finally they caught a glimpse of the guy and he admired her stubbornness and persistence, and they started talking, and he actually introduced her to somebody who got her to a top level, like the head of the Democratic Party. And one thing led to another. And then also, you may know this story even better than I, because I think our buddy Frank Clark told me this a few weeks ago. He said that Les Brown, the great motivational speaker, he wanted to be a radio DJ, so he kept showing up at the radio station office. And he said, I want to be hired to be a radio DJ. We don't have any openings. It's like, okay. And he came back the next day. It's like, why are you coming? Yesterday we told you we don't have. It's like, well, I thought maybe somebody was fired. Like, nobody's been fired. Came back the next week. Well, I thought maybe somebody died. It's like, no, nobody's died. It's like, okay, you can get coffee for us. And apparently, from what Frank tells me, one of their DJs came into the office one day to do his shift drunk. It's like, we can't put this guy on the air. It's like, okay, Les, here's your moment, but you can't say anything. And he said, well, secretly he'd been preparing his rap, so to speak, on his own, and he just let it loose anyway. And so, wow, he's really good. So I like people who are persistent and stubborn,
That's how I got the gig with Tony. Was my persistence, and it came out that way. So the short story is, Manny Goldman actually was like, he sent to me directly or in the power team, because he had moved over to California and became friends with Jarek, and they were like, we're opening up a division of the digital delivery in New York. So I had already at that point, I was, obviously involved in the power team. I've been to events. I now had been crewing and had built a relationship with Wesley Gu and, some other people. And I reached out and I'm like, hey, is this true? And they're like, yeah. He's looking for an LSR in New York. I said, great. I said, he's like, send me a resume. I'll get it to, HR. I'm like, I don't have a resume. And he's like, what do you mean? I said, well, I made records. I could send my discography. I mean, well, just put together whatever you got. So I did. Long story short, I ended up right when they were talking to them, right when they were in the middle of some transitions. So they whoever their VP was, they got rid of, or Gina just left and they were trying out a new guy or whatever it was. And then Roberto was going to be away. And they basically told me, the HR person, I got to a certain point, they were like, look, just to let you know, it's going to be a couple months before we even get back to you because of all this chaos and what's going on. And Roberto's away and yada, yada. I'm like, okay, I'm going to leave you a story or a joke or something every Friday. And I know you're going to know it's me because you're going to see the phone ring and all that. And you can pick up or not. I don't care. But I'm just letting you know I'm going to do that. Okay. And I did. Every Friday at 10 a.m., I picked up the phone and I called, hey, Julia, what's going on? I was just, had this story I thought I'd share with you. Here's a joke. Here's whatever. As I said. So I did that. And as I went through the process, I got to a point where in the interview process, the person was like, yeah, no, we're going to pass on Doug because I didn't have the experience. I didn't have, because I'd never done that gig. I spoke at music conferences and I was a master practitioner of NLP. Those are my qualifications. I'd never done sales. I had never done anything. And Julia, God bless her, she put me through to Roberto. And then finally my last interview, she said, because I was the only one who did what they said, that I called every week, that I had the persistence, that I had the dedication that no one else had who was going for that job. And that's what got me through to get into the position.
That's great.
And I've shared that story before as that to exemplify exactly what you shared, is that you've got to have that persistence and that fortitude. And that, dare I say, stubbornness. Now, obviously, you don't want to be stubborn until it hurts you. So have an ecological goal at the outcome of your stubbornness, because that stubbornness that we have can get us into trouble. Because if we're too stubborn that we're not willing to change, we miss out on the opportunities.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I was able to shift my paradigm of thought to go, okay, I made all these records and all that. I have to sometimes get that identity. I'm a musician, or I'm a producer, or I'm a whatever. And I could have been really stubborn with that. Or I could have said, how can I help people make music of their lives? And shift.
No, totally. No, I love your story. I'd never heard that before, actually. So I have a friend, actually, I've been in touch with a little bit this week, and I heard him as a public speaker at MasterCard in Westchester County, New York, 10 years ago, something like that. And he's talked about how the different generations speak different languages, baby boomers, Gen Z, millennials, and all that. And he said the younger generations think nothing of walking into the CEO's office and say, here's how you should change things. So, you can bear that in mind, like, how does this fit in? So you can't be oblivious, exactly. You can be stubborn, but aware, like, what serves you, what might hurt you. It's probably better not to hold back than, err on the side of not holding back, maybe, but I love your story.
Well, and I guess what I'm getting at is just know your outcome. Right. So, like, as an example, like my relationship, like with Heidi, I'm sure people sometimes in relationships get in spirited debates. When I have my outcome clear, like, and this is when things, and this is the basic question I ask, when things aren't going the way I want, then I go, wait, what is it that I want? Like, am I being stubborn? Am I holding on to an argument, a story, a perspective, a position that ultimately does not take me where I want to go? I want love. I want to connect. Right now, I don't feel that. And, like, not to say, it's not you would rather be happy or rather be right. It's like, what do you really want?
That's really good. Yeah.
Right. And why? And then my stubbornness can be loving her no matter what, right? If someone says something, but I want to love, so I'm just going to love you no matter what. And then not that it doesn't happen as like
I
need to pull that tool out a lot. But think of it with children. How often do you think that would happen? When your child is going through their normal, like, tantrums, perspectives, better, something's different, but you got to still love them. I love you no matter what.
Yeah. I hate to break this to you, but I've been working with an author recently. He wrote a book about the brain science of happiness, fight or flight, and the different regions of the brain and so on. And he's a college professor in California also. And so in his presentations, he says the human brain is still forming, not really fully developed until age 25. So I have a 22-year-old and a 19-year-old. You have a 5-year-old. So you have a few years. So there might be some arguments here and there. I'm just saying,
Yeah, no, totally. Well, and that's where, again, it's so important that we are responsible stewards of our states, of ourselves, of our stories. And why it's, as you share, so important that we share our stories so that people have access to other exemplars, other models, because sometimes we get trapped into not only our own mind, but also, and again, using social media as the example, ask and ye shall receive. So when you go onto Facebook and you engage in whatever, and this is for good or for bad, this is whatever you're doing, the algorithm goes, because they want you on Facebook, the algorithm goes, oh, you want that. You engaged in that, and it's not a judgment thing. It's like, okay, you're active on that conversation, on that page, on that.
Mm-hmm.
We're going to put more of that in front of you so
Right.
you stay involved.
Yeah.
And what's interesting about that is by proxy, out of the natural ask and ye shall receive, it's a digital RAS. It's a reticular activator system built into the algorithm so that you basically get more of what you've been focusing on. And what you've been focusing on may be getting you angry. And then you go, arg, shut up. And then Facebook goes, oh, you want more of that? Okay, here, right? And conversely, if you're going, oh, spreading the love, all that, they go, oh, you want more of that? And you get more of the happy posts and more, that and the advertisers. And it's why we got to mind the mind and be willing to question everything, be willing to hear other people's stories, other people's sides, and be willing to, engage in new conversations. And that's again why why I relaunched this, because it's my passion, like you, to get those stories out there so that people can take personal responsibility with resources.
That's good to bear in mind. No, I like what you just said. It's funny. I don't know, this might be kind of a silly little story, but a couple of weeks ago, we're still wearing our masks here in Connecticut, like everywhere, most places, maybe not Ozark, Missouri, but most places. And so I went into the Dunkin' Donuts. I shouldn't go there anyway. I know it was a lesson, but it's like, hey, you have a sign on the door that says you must wear a mask. Well, if your customer is not wearing a mask, I don't want to be like a jerk about it, but it's like, if we don't really understand the virus quite yet, And so I posted something on Facebook. I should have known better than to post anything even remotely political. Like, I thought I don't post politics really, for the most part. And so I don't know.
Well, here's what, just let me clear up before you get further.
Yeah, sure.
Masks are not political.
I know. Well, that's how I feel. I know exactly. But I'll name a name, first name anyway. There's a guy I used to know, nice guy named Maurice, who I met through the Tony Robbins people, and he posted a comment like, "Oh, you're a mask Nazi. Those poor people. You're criticizing the employees of the Dunkin' Donuts store." It's like, I'm really not. They're great people, hardworking, but it's like, if we don't understand the virus 100% yet, maybe we should wear our mask. So it's interesting. But I thought, well, I could delete that comment. I don't like what he said, and then a few other people. Craig from the Tony Robbins group is a national group as well. So I'm just going to leave their comments. They're free to say what they say, but like you said, if you're angry about something, it's like, Facebook, oh, you like that. It's like, so I left their comments. I didn't respond. So he's like, okay.
Yeah. And look, that is such an interesting thing that's going on, because again, we're talking about paradigms. We're talking about people's belief systems and what people do with the what you just shared. No one really knows what's going on, and and then when you have conflicting information, people need certainty.
Yeah.
And we have, and it actually, and it's just so sad that it things have gotten out of hand the way they have with the riots and all of that. And it's not surprising, considering that everyone was locked up and cooped up for all this time and having no energy. What I was surprised about was actually, for the most part, how well people dealt with in many respects. Now, I will say, when this whole thing started and the lockdowns and all of that, Heidi and I, the first thing we said was, what's going to happen with the people who don't know how to survive at home like this? People who struggle with drugs and alcohol, people who have, mental health issues, people who have that. I said, we're going to see domestic violence, addiction, relapse, suicide skyrocket. And we did our best to put stuff out there. And to your point, there were some people who were like, you don't understand, you don't get it, you want people to die. I'm like, no, we're actually saying we don't want these other people to die. And I will say, and I don't know personally in my world anyone that has died from COVID, but we do know multiple who have either killed themselves or overdosed.
Wow. Yeah.
And that is where I think there's, an interesting dialogue when you go, okay, if we want to talk about, circumstantial or what's the word? It's not empirical, but like the anecdotal data. I have more anecdotal data of people taking their lives, overdosing or relapsing than I do of someone falling prey. My stepfather lives in a nursing home in New York and is healthier than those people who took their own lives because they couldn't handle the stress.
Yeah, no, it's a good point. Well, I'm glad you're putting those messages out there, that wisdom out there, because again, and I've realized it might take a little push on the news media locally or nationally, because they get,
well,
my brothers and sisters in the news media, they get attached to this is the headlines, this is what we're covering.
So yeah, let's talk about that a little for a moment. What I've noticed as well, and this is a nonpartisan statement. The news makes money when people watch them. And I don't care what side of the aisle you are, there are people who glue themselves to the news. And when there's crazy stuff going on, people glue even more. What was upsetting to me, besides the fact that people are losing their minds, and that is what also drives some of the mental health issues, the addiction issues and all of that, because they're being inundated with all this negativity, because no one would tune in if it said 70 degrees and sunny, as you know. Tony Robbins, when he did Breakthrough, remember that show? It aired twice because it wasn't dramatic enough. It wasn't. It wasn't. So
solutions,
right. So when this whole thing started, I'm thinking to myself, man, this is going to be, a great opportunity for the personal development world to get some exposure, because there are going to be so many people in need, and there's practically nobody talking about that. And when it is, that's the small segment, but they'll spend, hours of, otherness that is stuff that actually doesn't serve.
That's a good point. No, I can't really argue with you. I mean, one thought that comes to mind for me is that, what's going on in this country right now, a lot of people are saying, you're not paying attention to my struggle or to what I'm going through. And so when the news media covers these challenging stories about people going through challenging times, they are paying attention to what people are going through. It'd be nice if they could offer some solutions, Right. I'm not going to say they're like milking it for the drama, like, oh, here's a tragedy, we're going to throw it at you.
No, I think it's systemic. I don't think it's like that they're consciously doing it. I think that it's and I hate this term, the new normal. It's just what happens when you're in that. It's just the RAS, it's just what they're looking at. It's not, I would like to believe, just like they're well-meaning doctors who prescribe drugs, right? I get it. Journalists, news providers provide news, and they know, what's the old term? The cliche, if it bleeds, it leads.
Yeah. Well, I will also say, I mean, I guess maybe this will reveal my politics, but I think if there are powerful and power-hungry forces at work in our nation, and if we just look the other way and don't cover what's going on, that would allow people to take advantage of innocent, less powered people. So
I agree with you. And the only thing that I would add is I think that it is not one organization, one person, one side who has that power, yields that power, or wants that power.
Yeah. Yeah. And, I do agree with you, actually. Yeah.
That's that's the real challenge. And to be honest, that's what I see is so sad about what's happening right now, that the people who are asking to be acknowledged for their pain, I believe, I support, I'm 100%. I don't want anyone to feel pain. I believe that there are people who are benefiting from that focus, as opposed to looking at what the real issues are. Like, instead of going like, well, how do we get here? Like things have changed. What is going on? Because we have progressed. I believe that the world, for the most part, has moved some from the 50s, from the 60s. I believe that there are more people who are celebrating the equality than back then.
Yeah.
There's always going to be people who don't appreciate or understand people.
Right.
That's the issue.
Right. No, that's a good point. I
What's going on spiritual and like not to I believe that some of this is because we've taken out the conversation of what, like, you know, dare I say, you know, I'm not particularly religious. I grew up Catholic, but all sort of, for the most part, all religions had at least a guide map of some moral, you know, are there perfect books? No, I'm not suggesting, you know, again, take what works, remove what's missing, or, you know, remove what's not helping. Nothing is perfect, but there are some benefits to the golden rules. Treat others like you want to be treated. You know, all these basic tenets that when we took out when we made it like, oh, you're infringing on my rights to whatever. I'm like, well, no, I'm literally just using, that happens to be in there. There's an example. It works.
Right.
Like,
right. No, I agree.
You know, like it's in the 10 Commandments, you know, thou shalt not kill. Period.
Well, somebody would probably say, well, if you look at the Christian wars hundreds of years ago, some people were killed.
Agreed. That's my point. It's never going to leave, but that doesn't mean that there isn't something good in there.
Right. Yeah. No, I totally agree.
Like I use the NRA as an example. Full disclosure, I'm not an NRA member, but I am a gun owner. Now, I don't know the NRA deep inside, but I gotta believe that the NRA is not sitting there going, ooh, you know, it'd be great. Let's make sure that we can kill random people by making sure guns are everywhere. No, their belief is that, from their perspective, is that you have the right to defend yourself. Yeah. Period. Like let's not get into the minutia of what weaponry and all of that. That's a separate conversation. But just the fact that their belief behind it is, and they're afraid, and again, this happens on both sides, that if you take away one right, then slowly you're going to take away more. I believe that people who believe that guns are bad and that people shouldn't have them also want the same thing.
Right.
Protection. They want people to be healthy and not get shot.
Right.
And if at least we could start
and they also
there.
Want the protection of their rights. They all want their rights to be preserved. Yeah.
Right. And that's the balance. So what if we focus more on the purpose, and then we could agree that we both want the same thing instead of making someone wrong for having a different process? Because to me, that's like getting mad at someone for wanting to take the scenic route instead of getting on the parkway. Like,
right. No, you have a great point. I often tell people, you spent so much time with the Tony Robbins organization. I often tell people about that video that Tony did on the morning of 9/11 at one of his seminars, where there was an Arab young man and an Israeli young man, and it's like these planes just took down the World Trade Center, and it's like, could these two people ever see anything in common? It's like, wow, it's amazing they found some common ground. It's like, that's amazing.
That's the game changer, and that is where I believe, like you and I and people in this world, that's our duty, is to do our best to expose those types of things, those opportunities, that it's okay to disagree. That doesn't, the worst thing that you and I can do is demonize someone for having a differing opinion. And it makes me sad when I see people on Facebook share something like that. Well, if you don't agree with me, then feel free, defriend me. Don't talk, I'm
right,
like, well, right, I would never do that to you if you disagreed with me. I love you and respect you. And just because we have a different opinion doesn't make you wrong. You see things one way, I see things another. I'm not right. It's just my belief. Right. And that may change. It always has. My beliefs are dynamic. There are certain beliefs I have that are fundamental, and some that I go, man, if it doesn't serve me, if I don't feel good when I believe that, then I'm going to look at it and go, well, maybe there's something else I could believe. And I wish that for, people right now, for humanity, that we can, and you shared that earlier about the compassion, I also think that a lot of that could also be directed inwards, like compassionate for yourself, because I think that sometimes we get stubborn in our opinions, and then we're afraid to change because we're afraid of what other people are going to say, or it's different than what I thought I was, who I thought I was, what I believed, because we've gotten so much into, and dare I say, identity politics. Then the name of that alone is already so damaging. That is not who you are.
Right. Well, I would also say, I don't, again, I don't want to take up too much time on your show here, but when you mentioned compassion directed inward, I think of suicide, the epidemic of suicide. A lot of people, they just envision that tomorrow could never possibly be better. I think that because things are changing and because we do have more and more opportunity literally every day and enough people around us, if we find them, sometimes it's hard to find them, but I do believe there are people who will support us in bringing our vision forward, so that we should have that compassion directed inward, because suicide is a major problem in our world right now.
I mean, I've shared it before. That's why I'm here. That's when I lost my career in music and my thing, my marriage, everything. I lost everything. Again, as I shared, I'm a gun owner. I have a .357 Magnum that I just fell to my knees, and I was ready to pull the trigger. And I felt like this is, why bother? Like, this is crazy. I got nothing now. I'm living at my mom's house. I mean, fortunately, she wasn't living there at the time, but I'm living at mommy's. I have no job. I have no prospects. The career, my music is gone. It's like changed forever. What's the point here? I got to start over. Like, who am I? And, by having a little compassion and gratitude is what started to make that shift. And I started thinking about, and I did it in that weekend. That day, it wasn't that weekend. This was in July. I made a decision to do a basket brigade again, and I didn't have any money, but I fed 55 families that Thanksgiving. I didn't personally. I raised the money and I got the group together and all of that. But it was coming from being grateful for what I had, not what I didn't have. And that's such a simple but not easy. Right now, you just said there's tons of opportunities. Instead of being pissed off at what's going on, what if you could get grateful for the fact that there are opportunities? Get grateful for the friends that you do have. Are there going to be some people that don't like you? Maybe. Who knows? You're only going to know if you're looking for it, right? What is your algorithm looking for? Is it looking for evidence of anger, fear, frustration, bitterness, right? Or is it looking for evidence of love, gratitude, peace, happiness, joy, laughter? And again, to end on that note, is that's what, again, I love about you, is you're always positive, supportive, everything, and your bigger picture of helping people spread that, which is
thank you.
Which is tremendous.
Well, it makes me feel good. Yeah.
And it should.
Thank you. Yeah. No, it's nice. So win-win, as they say. No question.
Yeah.
Thank you.
And if we could go win-win-win-win. Right. So we have a win-win, and then this goes out there, and then someone else has a win, that then when they have a win, they go, oh man, look what I was able to do. You could do it too. And then pay it forward.
Yeah, and I do feel that's really going on these days. More and more people waking up. Oh, I can be supportive of others, and I can notice those people. They've been having a hard time for years, but I just noticed that, and that's great. I'm very grateful. There's kind of an awakening going on, so it's interesting.
Amen, brother. Well, as we wrap up, is there any books that you've been reading that you recommend? Any programs that you've been excited about? And again, how can we get in touch with you?
Sure. Well, again, I'm always up for conversations: Zoom, phone, email, Facebook. Tom at Tom Martin Media. You can look in my business page on Facebook is Tom Martin Media LLC. So look for me there. One thing I've been enjoying lately, speaking of, the Tony Robbins organization, and you mentioned his name earlier, I've been doing some work with Jared Robbins in recent weeks and months. And for a number of weeks now, every Friday at 11 a.m. Eastern Time, he offers a free webinar. It's called the Small Business Owner's Survival Kit. Excuse me. And for me, it's been really helpful because I am one of those people who I don't want to put that label on me. It's like I'll always be that way, but I've always been more interested in the work itself and having adventures and getting interesting people. So I didn't really manage the finances of my work very well, to be perfectly honest with you. And so it's really what I need to hear as far as distinctions and way to look at things and how to pivot. And it's not boring financial strategies. It's about service. It's about paying attention to what you're offering and stuff like that. But it's, but I've been getting a lot out of that in this mastermind group. And like I said, I run a mastermind group. So if anyone wants to join us for free call on Zoom, there's a lot of, interesting people. Maybe
how do you get access to that?
Speak to our group. Just send me an email and I'll send you an invitation.
Okay.
Maybe you'd like to speak to our group sometime. I know they can learn a lot from you.
I mean, anything I do to serve. I probably know some of them. Right? I know Frank. I know Joseph.
And actually, I don't know if you remember from the New York Power team, Carol Froelich Hall, who is a documentary filmmaker. She was an opera singer. She's a Tony Robbins coach right now, but she did contract the virus, and so she has a story of overcoming that and
beautiful
kind of uncertainty. So, but there's a lot of interesting people. Yeah. So,
I should say I do know one person who contracted it. A very good friend of mine's son, and he's fine now, but he's like, it's pretty brutal at first. And Marshall Silver had it too. He talked about it, but it's definitely some interesting times we're in, and it's our purpose to support people in overcoming their relationship with what's going on out there, because we can't change what's going on out there. All we can do is change ourselves, our relationship with it, and that is going to change the world.
Absolutely. Fantastic. Well, it's been such a pleasure speaking with you. I love what you're doing, so thanks for making time for me.
Oh, dude, always. The privilege is mine. I love you for who you are and who you aren't, and I will obviously send some cool referrals to you. I'll get you on the phone with some people, and looking forward to more rock with you. Okay, thank you. It's been a pleasure. My best to your family and to your lovely little daughter. She's so cute. Thank you. Yours too, brother. Thanks, Doug. Great to see you. Bye. Peace.
Thank you so much for stopping by and hanging with us. And remember to subscribe wherever you listen to your podcast right here. And we look forward to serving you even more. Remember, download your free guided hypnotic meditation at guidedhypnotic.com. That's guidedhypnotic.com, where you'll get your free anxiety-busting meditation. We look forward to serving you, and if you have any questions, comments, please feel free to reach out. All right, we love you for who you are and who you aren't. God bless.